I've been and who I am, all the ways I've grown.
This isn't self-help, it's a full-on rebirth. Welcome to Girl Wake Up, the podcast for women who are done playing small, staying silent, or living by rules they never wrote. I'm Amy Polacco, journalist, divorce and life coach, and freedom warrior, and I'm here to help you take your power back. Because the system isn't going to save us. We need to save ourselves. So grab your coffee, your courage, and maybe a few curse words. It's time to wake up. I don't have the money. We hear this phrase over and over again, working in divorce. Welcome to Girl Wake Up. I'm a divorce coach and journalist who writes about this topic. And I want to tell you, when we hear that I don't have the money from a spouse, very often that's not the full story. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on how spouses hide assets, from hidden income streams to creative accounting and financial sleight of hand. I feel like I've seen it all, because if you want a fair outcome in your divorce, you have to follow the money. And to do that, you often need a forensic accountant. I'm so happy to have Sara Nanchanatt here with us, who is a fabulous one. Welcome, Sara.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I can't wait to hear from you, but I want to let everyone know about your amazing credentials. I mean, she's the founder of SN Forensics, where she helps clients resolve complex financial matters involving accounting disputes, financial investigations, family law cases, business valuations. That's key if there's a business involved, damages calculations, and business income claims. She began her career at Charles River Associates, supporting testifying experts on lost profits, FCPA investigations, white-collar crime. I have had clients who've had spouses involved in that, and insurance claims. She later led securities compliance and net capital investigations at FINRA and served as a subject matter expert at Travelers Insurance. Sara is a certified public accountant and certified in financial forensics and is a recipient of the AICPA Standing Ovation Award. I think these credentials are especially important for you, right? Because if someone says, Sara, I don't really need a forensic accountant, what do they do? I want to educate people about that. I mean, people sometimes say that about divorce coaches, right? We were talking about that, is that investing in us pays off huge dividends, right? So, first of all, I want to ask, for people who don't know, what exactly does a forensic accountant do?
Great question. So, a lot of times when people hear forensics, they think like CSI and blood
Right,
and
murder,
those types of things. Yeah. So, we don't murder people. So, just like putting that out on the table. But forensics means suitable for a court of law. So that's why you have the forensic science from, kind of the DNA side, but also from the forensic accounting. It means that everything we do is prepared to go to court and we can testify to it. We're testifying experts. So just like you're saying, it's that little bit of extra credential and extra investigative mindset that makes us, kind of the right pick for these types of cases, as opposed to maybe your tax CPA or your bookkeeper, because we have that legal training and background as well.
Right. And as we're going to talk about today, you know where to look for the money. I mean, so many of my clients, as you know, because I've sent some to you and you've helped them, thank you so much, are dealing with financial abuse and they've been kept in the dark. They don't know about the finances. So they don't know where the money is hidden, perhaps. I mean, what are the most common ways that spouses in a divorce hide assets and hide money?
So, great question. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now, especially as the gray divorces or later in life divorces are coming to play, is that one spouse has been kept from the finances during the marriage. And so they don't know where the bank accounts are. They don't know if they're investment accounts. It's just really this lack of knowledge, and whether that's intentional or unintentional from their spouse, that they have no idea where to start. So we see accounts that are hidden. We see real estate that might have been purchased without the knowledge. And so even if you, glance at the tax returns before you sign them every year, it doesn't mean you actually have the full financial picture. And so it's that lack of knowledge. And then there's so many ways that that can spiral out of control of where there could be funds in the divorce.
Absolutely. And I would say that for a lot of my clients, it is intentional, right? Uh, I think that it's very common, and I'm certainly not faulting any woman who has said, look, I'm going to handle the kids, the house, and everything else. And maybe they work too. And my husband is taking one for the team and doing the finances, right? But it's really putting the other spouse at a disadvantage when divorce happens because you've trusted that person. Sometimes I see retirement accounts and investment assets moved all around. I have clients who are asked to sign something, like just papers are thrown in front of them in this high stress situation. Like, I need your signature, just sign this. Oh, don't worry about it. Right. And so in a healthy relationship and partnership, you're trusting your spouse when they put a document in front of you and say, this is in our best interest and I'm making an investment or I'm moving this money around. But many will find out later that was not necessarily the case, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, working in this field, I have a husband who, doesn't fit the stereotypical route. I'm the financial person in our family. And it has led to me that, like, now we have an app that shows all of the spending and all of the credit cards and all of the accounts. And I'm like, make sure you know where this is. Make sure you know this because I just see it too often. And truthfully, when we first started dating or got married, I didn't think about it. I'm like, oh, like I'm the finance person. Of course, I'm going to run all of this. But then I see time and time again what happens when people don't have that access or that awareness. And
Mhm.
so I've intentionally tried to be better about it from, these types of cases of like, okay, I want to move the money. Let's sit down. Let's talk about it. Why are we moving it?
Mhm.
What's the investment strategy and things of that nature? Because I don't think it comes naturally to people. They just think, oh, I'll handle it. But what does that mean?
Right. I think that's great and wonderful. And one of the reasons I started this podcast, Girl Wake Up, is to educate all women, right? Not just women going through a divorce, but I believe that so many of us want to reach back and help the next generation or someone who's a few steps behind us, right? Obviously, I advocate that all women should have their own income or keep a foot in some sort of career in some way, shape, or form. I know that may be too late for someone who's been married for 25 years and given up their career. And of course, we help women through this. But I hear over and over again, Sarah, and I'm sure you do too, women say, I don't want my daughter to end up this way. Right. And I had an attorney called the prenup queen on. I believe all women should have a prenup or a postnup if they decide to stay home after they have kids. Right. That is a business decision. I think that we are conditioned in so many ways to accept that, okay, this is the plan for me, this is my gender role, and I'm trusting my partner. But, you know, more and more as you hear divorce stories, it's not in your best interest always to just trust the process. And you ultimately are the only person looking out for you.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of times women, they handle the mental load and you
Hmm.
have all of this. In my mind, I now view it as unbillable time. So, I'm someone who operates on an hourly billing
Right.
model. So, and that's made me think about how much is an hour worth of my time. But when you're salaried or you're giving up a job early in your career, I don't think you have that mindset of like, okay, if I stay home or if I spend 10 hours cleaning on a Saturday, like, what monetary value am I bringing with that time? And thinking about this unpaid
Hmm.
time and unpaid labor as something that's monetary. So when you're thinking about, my spouse is bringing in 300,000 a year, well, how much are you saving the family by being home
Right.
and
And
by
I think
doing all
studies
of
have
these
shown that
things?
stay at home moms earn on average, and this is probably lowballing it, like 184,000 a year, right? So that's why I really believe that when a woman decides to stay home, she should have money put into a separate account for her. But getting back to the hiding the money, Sarah, because I could talk about this other
I
stuff
know I
all
could
day.
talk forever.
But, you know, is hiding assets actually illegal or just unethical? Will you explain that for people?
So that's a great question. And I also just want to preface that I'm not an attorney in this realm.
Yes.
I think, you know, during the marriage, I would say, highly unethical. But when it comes to a divorce proceeding, like that's a legal situation. Like when you are compelled to give discovery, you are being told by law to provide all of the information. And if you choose not to provide it or you try to conceal it, you are in violation of those orders. And so I think what can be challenging about the family law system and matrimonial courts is, well, what happens when someone doesn't do it? And I think what I
Yep.
see, and I see you roll your eyes there, like there's not the repercussions that you want there to be. Like you really want it to be like, okay, you don't turn everything over, like you're held in contempt, you're going to jail. And I, truthfully have never seen that in a case, but um there are situations where, people's paychecks can be garnished if they've refused to provide child support or refused to turn over marital assets when they're supposed to. So there are some systems in place, but I don't know that I've ever seen anyone like
Right.
arrested for not
Right. Right.
disclosing their assets.
While many women have been arrested for custody violations and things. I just have to say that. I mean, I co-authored this book, Framed: Women in the Family
Hmm.
Court Underworld. You know, we all grew up thinking that our justice system was fair, and if somebody didn't pay, there would be ramifications right away. And a lot of us operate with that fear, right? We wouldn't dare violate an order or not provide full financial disclosure, because for everyone listening, no matter what state you're in, at some point, whether you're doing mediation, collaborative, or litigation to divorce, you have to provide a financial statement, right? It may be called an affidavit or disclosure, whatever it's called, but you are notarizing that and saying that it is truthful, right? So I do want to point out for people that once a divorce is filed and the other person is served, there are automatic court orders that kick in, right? And, it depends on the state. There's some variations, but generally they prohibit the spouse from moving or transferring like huge amounts of money, right? Like closing accounts, like taking out loans against a home or other assets, hiding assets, changing beneficiaries on insurance. So when your spouse is filed with those papers, it is like a wake up call for them that they should not be messing around with this and engaging in any funny business, right? And it's basically saying that the normal living expenses are allowed and should continue. If he's paying the mortgage or rent, that should continue. Household bills, reasonable spending, attorney's fees in some cases, right? So if somebody moves money or hides it, a judge, like you said, Sarah, can order that amount returned, can penalize the spouse or sanction them for violating court orders. But it's not always the case. I always tell clients, if divorce is in the air, which that's how I describe it a lot of times, hasn't been verbalized, right? But we know it's floating around, and you see that they're moving money, it does behoove you to file sooner rather than later, because at least that legal statement is made that they should not be moving it around. They should not be changing anything. I mean, I've seen cases where spouses cut off women from their ability to buy food, right? And even pay for basic expenses for them and the children. And I'm sure you've heard all these stories too.
Yeah, we see that a lot. And I think that's always really frustrating. I have a case right now where the woman was a stay-at-home parent, 30 years, they're going through the divorce. She's been given a temporary support figure,
Mm-hmm.
but he's allowed to continue operating as normal. So she's getting, a small percentage of his paycheck, and he's going to Vegas on trips and doing all of these things.
So
And so
common. They're
I
living
know.
lifestyles of the rich and famous, and then they're saying, "Why did you buy 3 boxes of mac and cheese for the kids? You should have bought
Right.
one."
Like, why didn't you dye your hair from a box at the convenience store when you've been,
Right.
going to
Yes,
beauty
that's
salons
another
for
good one,
30
right.
years? So I think, there is a lot of disparity in the divorce, no matter, how well intentioned orders can be. Um, and generally, the moneyed spouse continues living at a normalized standard, even
Mhm.
though that's like kind of depleting the assets and the other spouse isn't getting the same benefit.
Right, and you can pursue that, talk to your attorney about the fact that your spouse is dissipating the assets, because I've had many clients who, one, the husband is whining and dining his new mistress in Paris, right? And buying all sorts of gifts and things. You're seeing that there, right? And then you can't
Yes.
pay for Bobby's like baseball program. Like it's ridiculous in some of these cases. But I want to ask you, Sarah, for women listening, what is the first red flag? Do you think that something weird is going on with the money and the assets?
Yeah, so great question. I think I'm going to give you a couple. So, the first I would say, like we've been discussing, is if you've never been involved in the finances, it doesn't mean that there's necessarily something nefarious going on, but that should be a red flag to you to talk to your attorney and be like, I want all of those account statements right now. I want to understand what's going on. So even if there's, nothing crazy going on, you need to start moving that. Another red flag is if you look at your tax returns and you see
Mm-hmm.
the income that's reported on your returns compared to the lifestyle you lead. So it could be the tax returns, but also whatever they file. In New York, it's a statement of net worth. In New Jersey, it's a case information statement. So they're going to say, "Oh, I make 50,000 a year, but my annual expenses are 150,000."
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well how do you pay for those? Like where does the mystery $100,000 per year come in? And so it's really that like mismatch of information. Or I have a case that's dealing with child support right now where he's like, I have no money, I can't pay anything. He's just accruing debt. But when he went to apply for a loan, he said he made $30,000 a month. So,
Hey, that's how we started this whole episode. I don't have the money. I don't have it.
right,
I hear
can't
that
do
if I
it.
had a dime for every time I hear that, I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah. So, to summarize, I would say a lack of information or mismatch of financial information when you're starting to get in documents and it just doesn't make sense to you.
So the reporter in me wants to know, Sarah, what is the most shocking way you have seen money hidden in divorce?
So, I think we're moving away from it, but I would say like cash. It always shocks me. Like, I'm a millennial. We don't carry cash anymore.
Right.
And there are people who like operate their businesses entirely in cash. They don't record a dime of it. And then I have
Hmm.
heard of cases literally money under the mattress, like $1 million in cash.
Wow. Well, that was one of my questions for you too, is are there certain professions where you see it is easier to hide money? If someone has their own business, can they hide money as well? I hear that all the time, right? When I have a client whose spouse owns their own business, suddenly this booming business has a terrible downturn and a horrible year, and all of a sudden their expenses have mushroomed through the roof, which is of course preposterous, right?
Yes. And so to answer your question, my answer would be exactly if they own their own business and they control their income stream. If
Mhm.
you're a W-2 employee or even a 1099, like there are tax documents that are going to follow. Like it's a little bit more challenging to hide that income. When you're running your own business, I love when I get to see that, oh, you make $20,000 per year, but your kids go to private school, you drive luxury cars, you go on $50,000 vacations every year. So it's to
Right.
me, I love a challenge. And when I see a case like
I
that,
love
I'm
that
like,
about you.
this isn't even hard. Like, obviously, there's something going on here. And so I work with a lot of business valuation experts as well. And what they always say is if it didn't make any money, why would you do it? There is a risk of
Mhm.
owning a business. It's a ton of work. I'm sure I work like 80
Yep.
hours a week.
Yep, yeah.
And if you could have a steady W-2 job that pays more than you say your business makes, why are you not choosing that option? And it's generally because you're underreporting your income.
Right. And, there are executives and W-2 employees and corporate employees who also are able to engage in like a shell game, right? I have heard clients' husbands say things like, well, it's very complicated. I get a bonus for this, stock options, there's a lot of buckets here. And in one case, the attorney said, yes, in front of a judge, we want to see in every one of those buckets, right? Because
Right.
that's a big thing, right? Hiding bonuses, getting a lower salary, and then getting it in a delayed bonus, hopefully after the divorce. What do you see with these corporate types?
Yeah, and so I think, I'm a huge advocate of subpoenas in the process. I think relying on the information that your spouse provides you is not always 100% there. And you can actually subpoena their employment records. So
Hmm.
you can say, where, like, let me see their pay slips. Where is the money going? Where are the stock options? Where are the bonuses? And that's where it kind of brings it together. So they can try to hide as best as they can, but there are ways to get that information and get an understanding. Now, what can be challenging is depending on the state you live in, there's different definitions of income. And so
Hmm.
sometimes states will say, oh, we're only going to consider the W 2 income for the child support or alimony because the bonuses are conditional based on annual performance or the stock options are not guaranteed
Right,
and
right.
things of that nature. So even if you can find it, there's a lot of challenge with the legal complexity of what the definition of income is and what you're able to fight for in terms of their full income for support purposes.
I think a lot of women who are thinking about divorce, hopefully they're listening to this episode, wonder what financial documents do I have to gather? And I did put together an electronic playbook called the Proactive Playbook for Divorce, where I have Excel spreadsheets that women can download. It's just $37. I put together the things I wish I had, Sarah, right? As a writer type, I'm not the numbers type that you are. And I wish I had this chart that I made where I could check off, okay, I got the tax returns. Okay, I got the insurance policy. Here's the mortgage information. I assume those are all the most important things to start with, right?
Yeah, so we want tax returns, bank accounts, insurance policies, any estate planning documentation, credit cards are another big
Yep.
one. So you kind of can start there. And then what, as a forensic accountant, we start tracing it. And then we're like, okay, I'm seeing transfers back and forth from these accounts. It makes me think that it's someone closely related or potentially their account.
Hmm.
Now we want this information. And so whatever we can get up front to start is super helpful. And something that I always tell people is if, let's say, you've totally been shut out, you have no idea about anything, and your spouse is not providing it, keep an eye on the mail. Doesn't
Hmm.
always work because some people get paperless statements, but do you see a letter from Charles Schwab? Do you see a letter from
Right.
Bank of America? That's where to start your subpoena process. And then we can start tracing and figure out the other accounts involved.
Great point, because I always tell clients when they feel sometimes despondent, frankly, because they don't have access. And I don't recommend that they start trying every permutation of a password and alerting their spouse, right? Especially if they're in that planning stage when I'm telling them, do not show your cards, plan in silence and strategize, right? But attorneys often say, and I'm sure you do too, even if you can't get the account number for that Fidelity account, they had an old account there from an old job, something got rolled over. Even if you have that building block information, you can say when they produce their financial statement, wait a minute. I know you had a pension here from this. I know you had this. What about those assets? And that's where you start filling in the blanks. It really is a team effort, right? And when do you say that people should call a forensic accountant?
So I love to be called as early as possible. Other forensics might have differences. I operate on what can we do for the least amount of time to get the most amount of information? So let's say you think you're going to need a huge forensic analysis. Well, we don't know that yet. Why don't you pay us for an hour or two, go through all your documents, and we'll help your attorneys with the subpoena requests or the discovery requests, and then we'll get it back. Pay us for an hour or two to review it. Like it doesn't have to be a $20,000 retainer on day one. It can be piecemeal. And once we get the documents, we could say, oh, yeah, totally makes sense. Everything looks like it's here. Or, hey, I'm seeing some flags. I'd like to do this analysis. Here's where the full engagement is going to take place.
That's one of the things I love about working with you is, look, I'm in Fairfield County, Connecticut. It's not cheap to hire an attorney, and sometimes the forensic accountants will say, I need a $10,000 or $20,000 retainer. And that's cost prohibitive for a lot of women. And I say, don't start stressing out. I have a great forensic accountant who can work hourly. Why don't you start with her and have her, take a look? So thank you for that. The last question I want to ask you, Sara, is there a major snafu or mistake that women make that allows money to be pilfered away and hidden? Is it perhaps, like in my world, it could be they're rushing up to their spouse and saying they want a divorce right away before they try to get the financial information, or is it something else? What do you see?
That's a great question. And I think it can vary on the situations. I think a lot of times, similar to what you're saying, but showing your cards, I think
Mm-hmm.
women think like, oh, I can just convince him of this or I can do that. So I really advise people like listen to your attorneys. Don't communicate outside of the attorneys as you're going through the process because you can give away pieces of strategy or thought without
Absolutely.
even thinking about it. And I'm working on a case with that right now where it's really like, yes, I know you're angry and you're upset, but you have to let the system do what the system needs to do because you can end up sabotaging your own case.
Right. And I think when I see a client divorcing a manipulative type, I often see that abusive spouse try to get them to sit down at the kitchen table and let's just, we don't want to pay attorneys, honey. Like, let's do it ourselves. We can do it. But there's a huge power imbalance. Often the other spouses has been, to your point, kept in the dark about finances, and they're just trying to steamroll right over you without you having the benefit of a divorce coach, a forensic accountant, an attorney in your corner. And, I had a new client the other day who was understandably stressed out about the cost of divorcing, right? And I said, you have to think of it as an investment in yourself, right? Because you will get a settlement. And, I've seen where women have tried to scrimp and, do it a certain way. Boy, has it bitten them later when they've realized he's hidden money, hundreds of thousands going back to court. When you have a divorce decree and trying to prove fraud is no easy task. Reopening that, courts don't really want to reopen it. And so you have to have a lot of evidence. It's going to cost you attorney's fees, time, emotional and physical distress. So do it right the first time. Right.
Yeah. And I would just add sometimes we see the flip side too of
Mm-hmm.
like maybe we're $5,000 off and to kind of think about what the cost of your peace of mind is. And do you want to do the forensics? Do you want to go to the attorney? Do you want to do all of this for a minimal amount? Because sometimes the emotions override it. And so I think, what you said exactly about having the right team is the people in your corner to help advise you on when it makes sense to fight and when it makes sense to walk away.
Great, great advice, everybody. So I want to move on to our segment here on Girl Wake Up called Truth or Trap, where I'm going to throw out a statement that, maybe people have said or they think, and I want you to weigh in, Sara, as our forensic accountant expert, on whether this is truth or a trap. Cryptocurrency has made it much easier to hide assets in divorce.
Oh gosh. I think that's like a little bit of both.
That's okay.
So cryptocurrency, there are experts that exist that can trace funds in the blockchain and they can do it. I am not one of them, but they are out there. You can always see the transfer of funds. So, like, let's say they have a Coinbase
Right.
account. We can see it leaving your bank account and going to Coinbase. What happens after that is really tricky. I've also had some cases where people have it stored on like flash drives and things like that. So it's
Mhm.
harder to follow. I do think it is still ultimately traceable.
Okay, that's great news because I had a client who was thinking about divorce and she's kind of in a holding pattern, which is common, right? And she was very concerned because her husband's entire income was through cryptocurrency, like in a state out west. And, you know, she was concerned that he could say he had zero income. And I said to her, look, any court and any attorney is going to make the case that you have a huge, beautiful home, you have children, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're living a certain, lifestyle that has to be supported somewhere. And so I was trying to allay her fears to some degree and also put her in touch with a cryptocurrency expert. But I was curious what kind of trends you are seeing. So thank you for answering that one for us. And last but not least, I do have a listener letter from someone who's in my support group where it's called Strong Savvy Women. It's on Facebook. It's free. Anyone can join. I have women thinking about divorce, like this listener. I have women in the process and some post-divorce who wonderfully give advice to those still going through it, right? So she says, Dear Amy and Sarah, I'm starting to think about divorce after 18 years of marriage. And the truth is, I don't really understand our finances. My husband has always handled everything, taxes, banking, investments. And when I try to ask questions, he says, I'm worrying about nothing. Common, right? To be gaslit. Lately, though, I've noticed things that don't add up, like accounts I didn't know existed and money moving around that I don't understand. I'm afraid that if I bring this up directly, he'll just get better at hiding things. How can someone start protecting themselves financially when they feel completely in the dark?
So, great question. And I think we've touched on this a bit.
Mhm.
Like you said, you can immediately file for divorce and get some sort of order that protects the accounts. I think just like keep some great notes for now of like, where is the money moving? Take a screenshot, take whatever you have because you don't know when and if you're going to need it. So I would say start compiling your questions, start compiling the information because if all those institutions need to be subpoenaed, you're going to be a step ahead of the process.
Right, exactly. I think that, you know, the other thing is I never push anyone into divorce, right? I always say, look, I've had clients who come to me, then they want to go work on the marriage. I think that's wonderful if it's possible. But when you're in an abusive dynamic, it usually doesn't get better, it gets worse, right? And so if someone's starting to move money around, I think we as women, I've done it too, we put our heads in the sand sometimes and think it's all going to go away, right? We just want everything to be calm. We just want to keep our family intact. We just want the Norman Rockwell life we thought we were going to have, right? And I get that. It's part of the grieving process. You're grieving the disillusion of this partnership. And you care about your kids. But the reality is you're protecting yourself and your children when you take action to stop this, because when you start to see something, you've got to trust your gut. Just like with infidelity, you may not have the smoking gun tape of somebody at a motel, but you don't need that, right? You have your gut that something's not adding up. And I think the same goes for finances. Wouldn't you agree, Sarah?
Absolutely. And, if you've been a stay-at-home parent, like maybe consider looking for a job opportunity, like start earning your own income, start
Right.
having your way out if you need that. Because we were speaking before the call, like I have divorces that started in 2020, it's 2017. Like you never know how long the process is going to be, and the funds can be held up. One spouse might continue to control them. So,
Right.
kind of having your own little nest egg and your own plan of how can I get out of this financially?
I think that's a great way to end. You can have your own stash in the mattress or wherever. Right? I often say to women who are really struggling in that situation, get some cash back at the grocery store, put that aside, see if you could do some little odd jobs, babysitting this or that, whatever you can do to earn some money. So thank you so much, Sarah. How can people find you? Will you tell everybody?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I have a website, it's snforensics.com, and there is a contact form in there. You can fill out the form with your information. If you're super ready to speak, you can also book a consultation directly. And then
Mhm.
from there, we'll start having conversations and we'll see what makes the most sense for your case. I think there are a lot of other financial professionals who are great in the divorce process. So I really value it as if you're coming to me, I'm an information source. Maybe you don't need a forensic accountant, but I will make sure you end up exactly where you need to be for your process.
I think that's great advice. Yes, many of my clients work with CDFAs, right? And a forensic accountant and a coach. And again, these people are doing this to protect you. I mean, for many of us, like our heart has led us to this work, right? And so thank you, Sara, for all you do. And I hope this was helpful for all of you out there. Thanks for listening to Girl Wake Up. I'm your host, Amy Polacco. If this episode woke something up in you, don't let it fade. Share it with a friend who needs to hear it, leave a review, and keep this conversation going. Remember, no one's coming to save you, so she did.